Welcome to the Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Headspace and Timing, a show dedicated to breaking down the stereotypes of veteran mental health. I'm your host, Dwayne France. Let's get ready to make sure that your headspace and timing set correctly. Hey everybody, welcome to Headspace and Timing. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for checking us out. As many of you who serve know, the M2 machine gun, the 50 cal, is one of the greatest weapons in the military's arsenal. If the weapon's headspace and timing isn't set right, however, it's just a huge chunk of metal. Veterans can be rendered inoperable if their headspace and timing's not set correctly either. That's my mission here, to raise awareness about veteran mental health and reduce the stigma against seeking support. Each week we'll talk about different aspects of veteran mental health and interview mental health professionals that are working with veterans, service members, and their families around the country. Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Headspace and Timing, a podcast dedicated to veteran mental health and wellness. My name is Dwayne France, and I'll be your host. I'd like to thank Eddie and Bennett, the creators of Change Your POV Podcast Network, for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on veteran mental health. These first few shows are going to be dedicated to telling you a little bit about me, my thoughts about veteran mental health, and why in the heck you should spend your precious time listening to me. The Change Your POV Podcast Network is focused on helping veterans transition successfully from their military service to their post-military lives. If you appreciate this programming, please support the network by heading over to the Change Your POV Podcast Network Patreon page, located at www.changeyourpov.com/Patreon. You'll be able to join other supporters of the show and by donating a few of your hard-earned dollars so we can keep bringing you some awesome content. So as I mentioned, I'm going to take the time over these first couple episodes to talk to you a little bit about who I am, what I do now, what I did before in the military, and specifically on this first episode, I'd like to give you 10 of my thoughts on veteran mental health. So this is going to be kind of laying the groundwork of what I believe and what I think about veteran mental health. So first, about me. I am a retired Army non-commissioned officer. I spent 22 years in the Army. A lot of my time was spent overseas, not just in my deployments, but also I did 2 tours in Germany. My first tour back in the mid-90s was in Mannheim, Germany, and then did another tour later in Kaiserslautern, Germany with my family. And I'll get into my military experience in a little bit, but what I am right now is a master's level mental health counselor. It means I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, and I work as a therapist, a counselor, exclusively with veterans, some veteran spouses, but all of my work is exclusively working with military service members and their families. The idea of what is a counselor, what everybody has the idea of, what a therapist is. You got the image of Freud on the couch, I do have glasses, but some guy with glasses stroking his chin and nodding sagely and giving you advice and asking you about your mother. It's not exactly how it works. The idea of professional clinical mental health counseling, though, it can be very different. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. And there's a lot of different terminology in the field. So I'd like to go through that a little bit. You have different levels of mental health professionals. You have a master's level clinician, which individuals like myself, they have a master's degree in some type of psychology or clinical mental health related discipline. My particular degree is in clinical mental health counseling. I received my degree in 2015, about 8 months after I retired from the Army. But there are other types of master's level mental health counselors, licensed clinical social workers. You'll see that as an LCSW, or licensed marriage and family therapist, also known as LMFTs. My particular discipline is a licensed professional counselor, LPC. Right now, as of the airing of this, I'm approximately a month away from my full licensure. When an individual gets a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, they have to work under supervision for a period of time before they're allowed to basically practice independently. And that's where I've been for the last 2 years since my graduation. I've been working in an agency under supervision. My clinical director is my clinical supervisor. And so that's for all of the mental health professions. You need to have a certain period of time actually working with clients before you can actually apply for licensure. So between the three types of master's level or mental health professionals have master's degrees, there are some various differences. And as we go through in the show, and I hope you'll come back and listen to some of them, we're going to have a lot of different mental health professionals come on the show. I'm going to have some LCSWs, some LMFTs, and some other licensed professional counselors like myself. And you're going to find that there's not really that much of a difference when it comes to clinical work. There's some theoretical differences. I personally feel as though myself, the licensed professional counselor, I'm more focused on wellness as opposed to illness, meaning I don't automatically assume that a client is sick, that I need to make them well, that I need to cure them. I come from the mindset that at some points we're less well, some points we're more well. We have some strengths in some areas, and we need to shore up some things in some other areas. And hopefully as we talk to some of the other master's level clinicians, we're going to find that we have a lot more in common, that which separates us. That's something a lot of veterans are kind of confused. They'll call me doc. I do not have a PhD. I'm not a doctor. Of course, that's some of the idea. I mean, heck, even my family. I went home a couple months ago, and they said, "Oh, so you're a psychologist?" And the psychologist has a doctorate, a PhD, or a PsyD in some type of mental health or psychology discipline. And so the psychologist is a PhD level, a doctorate level, and those are the ones that can call themselves doctor. I am not a doctor, although we in the military have a habit of calling our medics doc, and they're even less of medical professionals than maybe even I am, I guess. So while I appreciate it, and it's I take it in the respect that it's given, there is a difference between a master's level clinical mental health professional and a PhD level, a doctorate level. So you have the clinical mental health counselor, LCSW, LMFT, those are master's degrees, your PhD psychologists, and then you have psychiatrists. Psychiatrists are medical doctors, MDs, DOs, those individuals who actually went to medical school and then as part of the specialty specialized in psychiatry specifically. Psychiatrists can prescribe medications. I cannot prescribe medications. I'm not familiar with medications. I do have some basic understanding of psychopharmacology, but I am not a psychiatrist. Also, psychiatric nurse practitioners are individuals that some veterans may come across. And so when somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to see the shrink," they could mean I'm going to see my therapist, my master's level counselor. I could be seeing my PhD level psychologist, or I could be seeing my psychiatrist. None of which actually shrink, anything. But this is sort of the complicated nature of, what does it mean when I go to see a therapist? Who am I talking to? And there are other wellness practitioners, substance abuse counselors. I'm currently practicing the state of Colorado, and there's different levels of substance abuse professionals. You can have substance abuse counselors who have master's degree in substance abuse counseling. You can have substance abuse counselors level 2, level 3, at different levels that have different specialties. You have therapists that, mental health professionals that practice a wide range of different techniques. I have some colleagues who are therapists, licensed mental health professionals, but they specialize in equine therapy, for example, or other type of things like that. And then, of course, you have individuals who have no specialized formal clinical mental health training at the master's level or above, for example, but they still work in the wellness space. Life coaches, the individuals who are teaching things like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or things like that. That it really it moves into the realm of wellness, and it moves into the realm of using your strengths to become a better you. Executive coaches and things like this. Those are not necessarily clinical mental health professionals. Really, a lot of the difference is licensed clinical mental health professionals are able to identify, diagnose mental health conditions, disorders. I've had specialized training in assessments, psychological instruments, diagnosis, but even basic theoretical orientation, the history of psychology, and things like that. So that's a little bit of an overview of even what it means to see a mental health counselor. A lot of veterans say, hey, I'm going to behavioral health, or I'm going to mental health. And you could see any one of these types of mental health professionals. And it really doesn't matter. It's and when I try to make this distinction, a lot of veterans, they're like, hey, can you talk to me? Are you going to help me? And is it going to be worth it? And as long as the answer is yes, they don't care if, they just want to make sure that I can help them out with whatever's going on. So I have been working as a clinical mental health counselor directly since January 2014. As part of every master's level program, you actually have to start working as a therapist or a counselor while you're still in the program. And I started working with veterans as early as January 2014, specifically working with our local Colorado Springs, Colorado Veterans Court. The majority of my clients are all veterans who, in one way, shape, or form, for one reason or another, found themselves crosswise with the law and ended up standing before a judge and decided to take advantage of an excellent program that helps them connect with clinical mental health counseling and therapy treatment in conjunction with taking responsibility for what happened. That is definitely a passion of mine, justice involved veterans. And again, as a teaser, it's going to be something that we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes. Definitely hoping to get some of my colleagues, not just in my court, but in different locations around the country, to talk about what a veterans court is, what a veterans court does, specifically from a clinical mental health counseling standpoint. On top of that, I'm working in the nonprofit sector. I'm currently executive director of a nonprofit that's affiliated with our for-profit mental health counseling agency. I don't work for the VA at all. I often say it's better to work with the VA than for the VA, but that's me on the outside. You're not going to hear me bash the VA. As a veteran myself, I go to the VA for my services. I think that the VA is doing a lot of different things. I've seen a lot of different VAs in different regions of the country, and just like I've been to a lot of different posts, and Fort Polk, Louisiana, is not as great of a place to be stationed as Fort Carson, for example. And so just like in the military. The guy at 29 Palms would rather have been stationed in San Diego. There's different areas, or there's different regions in the VA, and they're each managed independently, and whether it should or shouldn't be like that. It's the way it is. But I do what I do as a private mental health counseling professional, independent, but in collaboration with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And that's something else I hope is to have some clinicians from the Department of Veterans Affairs coming on the show, talking about what their experience is. I have seen the VA change over the last 8 to 10 years. I am the son of a Vietnam veteran, and through the experiences of my father, who has moved from one location to the other in different VA experiences, I've seen how it's changed just in the last 25 years. And so while I recognize that the VA of today is not going to be the VA from 10 years from now, and it's not the VA of 10 years ago, there are definitely some improvements that can be made. And I believe that it's important for us as mental health professionals on the outside in the communities to be able to help bridge that gap. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I do now. What I did then, I talk about meaning what I did in the military. I was not a mental health professional in the military. I was a truck driver, and I was in logistics, and we can talk about soft skills and things like that. But the military is made up of a whole bunch of different MOSs. Long story short, which is a little too late already, but I decided to try and enlist in the reserves. When I first joined, I lasted about a year before I decided that the Army was the best thing that was happening in my life at the time. What a lot of people don't know is there's no combat arms in the reserves. I went in the reserves, said, hey, send me on the first thing smoking. I'll take whatever you got. And they were all support occupational specialties. Then when I went active duty, I said, hey, I'll take whatever you got. Send me, I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to do, really wild things. And they said, well, that's nice, but you already have a job and the Army's not going to retrain you. So if you want to come back in, you have to come back in as a truck driver. And there were some different opportunities throughout my career to make different choices, to change my job, and I didn't. And I chose different things, and we can all kind of relate to those kind of things in our lives where, we're standing at a crossroads and we choose one path and we just continue on down. But I did spend 22 years, about 21 of that active duty as a logistics guy. And I have the unique experience of bridging the gap between the peacetime Army and the wartime Army. So I had been in the Army for about 9 years, or 10 years, I guess, by the time, 9 years by the time 9/11 happened. So I had almost a decade. I was a staff sergeant already, and my family and I were in Germany on 9/11. So for me, my memories of 9/11 happened in the afternoon, as opposed to many people in the stateside. Their memories of 9/11 are based in the morning. And so I was in Germany when all that kicked off. We did a lot of support then in getting the first elements ramped out to Afghanistan. I was in Kaiserslautern, Germany, and we did a lot of the European support for the initial push into Afghanistan, and was able to. At that point, I thought I was able to start negotiating my way into a combat role. I was a young staff sergeant and one of the lead troops in combat, and all that glory in my eyes kind of stuff. And the Army, in its infinite wisdom, decides to give you exactly what you didn't ask for. And so I spent 3 years on recruiting duty from 2002 to about 2005. So I had the benefit of signing up young men and women to go fight in combat before I was able to go deploy. And we can all make our jokes about the recruiter and the crooked individual. I will remind you, your recruiter was not the one that helped you choose your job. It was that guy at MEPS that talked you into taking that crappy MOS that you chose, or helped you sign up for an undesignated MOS, or tried to convince you that fire support specialist means you were going to be a firefighter, like our friend Eddie related in his enlistment story. So it's that guy at the MEP station. It's not your recruiter who screwed you over, although recruiter gets all the bad rap. And I did know some unscrupulous recruiters, just like we all know some unscrupulous individuals in all our walks of life. But I had the benefit of being stationed outside of Fort Meade, Maryland, and it wasn't useful for me to BS the young men and women that I was trying to put in the Army, because everybody in the community served one way, shape, or form. So it kind of kept an honest man honest, and really was a good time. Helped me understand a lot about the essentially later on as I went to be a leader in the military. It really helped me understand the young soldier, the mindset of the new recruit, so to speak. And so I do find that my time in recruiting duty helped me be a better leader in the Army later on. So I made Sergeant First Class while I was on recruiting duty, and then ended up coming out here with my family in 2006 to Fort Carson. And less than 8 months later, my unit was on the ground in Iraq. Did one of the first 15-month tours. We were the ones that got surprised with 15-month orders. We went on 12-month and we got extended for 3. So Iraq 06 to 07, December of 07. I was in FOB Rustamaya. Our battle space was MND North, Multinational Division North Baghdad, the area around the Rusafa district and south to Sadr City at that time. Our limits were the southern and I think eastern borders of Sadr City. The Army, the military, didn't go back into Sadr City until April of 08, about 4 or 5 months after we took off out of country. But that was the heavy time of when we started the concretization of Baghdad and the separation of units. EFPs, electronic force projectiles, were huge then, and if I've never seen the Devil's Tool, that's definitely one of the most significant. My unit's mission, among other things, in moving supplies around the battle space was to be able to recover battle-damaged vehicles, which kept us more busy sometimes even than supplies movement. So in that particular mission, I was a company operations NCO, truck master for those logistics folks. Basically, think about it as the company S3, the senior E7 for the company. So I was one of the 4 people that kind of what said went happened. So then we returned from that. The Army, in its infinite wisdom, again decided to allow me to do another 3 months on recruiting duty in the summer of 2008, which was really the only time I had down, the only summer I had in between that deployment and the next deployment in June of 09. And so 09 to 10, I was in Afghanistan. This time I was a platoon sergeant. We did a security escort mission in Regional Command East, focused out of FOB Finty, Jalalabad, moving supplies north to FOB Bostic. And at this point, we were not logistics. We were gun trucks. We were security escort. So typically missions that would have been given to MPs or of course scouts or infantry, mobile infantry. That's what we did. Is we were in charge of ensuring the safe delivery. And a lot of that was pretty kinetic. So that was my most kinetic deployment. We lost some great people on that deployment, and probably, and as I've written before, and I'll probably talk about before, both the best time and the worst time that I've ever had in the military. It's really interesting in that there's certain areas that are some really big hot spots. You'll hear about Helmand province and the Arghandab Valley south think it's southeast or northeast of Kandahar. Paktia and Paktika province in RC East South, how they split it. And then into KL. Into KL is where we were operating out of. And some of the most significant events of the Afghan conflict up to that time were happening in RC East. And a lot of it was PSAF, precision small arms fire, snipers, and harassment fire. But we did have some pretty hairy firefights, and later on in our deployment started cropping up with IEDs. And so led a platoon with that, me and my platoon leader, Blake Howard. You're a great guy. You're probably not going to listen to this, but I'll make sure you get a link. But my guys and gals in that time are some of the bravest and some of the most courageous, some of the strongest people that I've ever known, ever had the honor to know. Came back from that, was given the opportunity to take over a company, so spent some time as a first sergeant, helping some wounded warriors transition from active duty, and so that's really where I kind of got the bug to start focusing on helping veterans afterwards. And I first started seeing that we can do all kind of different things for veterans. We can make sure that resumes are squared away, but if their mind is not right, if their mindset is not right, then the transition is going to be a challenging one for them. After that gig as a first sergeant, I had the opportunity to go back to Afghanistan, 2011-2012, on a MIT team assignment. It was actually, we called it a validation transition team. So we worked with the Afghan Ministry of Defense in assessing and validating Afghan company elements as they finished up with their training. So essentially, if you were in the military, you think of OCs at the National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center, or if you're going through any kind of major training exercise, you have a group of cadre that are evaluating you, observing you, and that's what we did in conjunction with some Afghan Ministry of Defense level colonels and their staff. So did that for about 9 months, came back, and right as I was planning on ending up my career and hanging up my spurs, the Army, again, in its infinite wisdom, decided to let me jump out of airplanes again. One thing I'd forgotten to mention, I glossed over the early part of my career. I spent 3 years in the 82nd back in the late 90s, and consider that one of my most enjoyable assignments. And leaving Fort Bragg thinking I would get back fairly quickly, and never got back to the airborne community until I was almost too old to enjoy it. And the Army decided to send me to 10th Special Forces Group, which I appreciated. Extended my military career for about a year or so, and I decided to do some excitement and venture really wild things. Had the opportunity to go to North Africa with those bubbas, and really appreciated the ability to kind of go out on top in my military career, and find an assignment that I really enjoyed. Injured myself on a jump in 2012, because jumping when you're 40 years old is nothing like jumping when you're 28 years old or 25 years old. And injured myself Halloween 2012. Had to jump twice more just to make sure that I locked it in pretty good, because I have no knowledge or understanding of what my limits are, and continued to kind of re-injure myself, and decided in the summer of 13, when I came back from North Africa, to go ahead and hang up the old parachute. And so in one sense, I do have a well-rounded understanding of the military mindset. Most of my support, the majority of my support, has all been in light infantry support, both in the 82nd, 4th Infantry, and 2nd Infantry Divisions, as well as 10th Special Forces Group. And so I've worked very closely with a lot of the light infantry guys. I have no clue about tanks and armor. Sorry, Eddie, but you got to find another logistics guy for that kind of stuff. But not only then do I have the understanding of the military mindset, the leadership aspect, the hurry up and wait, all of the different things that come along with the military. I have the experience and the training as a clinical mental health counselor to be able to kind of bridge the gap between what a veteran knows and what a mental health professional knows. So now that I've given you an overview of a little bit about who I am and what I do, both as a mental health professional and as a veteran, just gave you the 30,000-foot view of what I do now and what I did then. I wanted to be able to give you 10 different points of sort of the things I believe about veteran mental health. So I'm going to kind of run through these pretty quick. I'm not going to go in depth into a whole bunch of them because these are all topics that I'm going to be addressing throughout the course of the show. So this is a little bit of a preview of the things that maybe I think, the things that I believe. I do have to tell you that even though I am a mental health professional, nothing on here should be construed as professional clinical mental health counseling advice because I don't know what your situation is. I'm not familiar with your experiences. And I always recommend, if I'm talking to any veteran on Veterati, or I often do some phone consultations and things like that, it is not in a clinical role whatsoever, and that you should definitely seek clinical mental health counseling advice from someone that you speak to face-to-face, someone who is authorized to operate, a licensed professional in your area. So here it is, 10 different things that I believe about veteran mental health. Number one, mental health and wellness is an essential part of our military transition as employment, housing, everything else. In the period of time after I retired and before I became a full-time mental health professional, I was working as a program director for a nonprofit that provided housing for homeless veterans. And I saw that we could do just about everything we could for these veterans, provide them good clothes to do interviews in, interview techniques, set them up with jobs, find them locations that would be able to get them into housing. Well, the one thing that we had challenges with over and over again is helping them get clinical mental health counseling. And for a lot of these veterans, and the one thing we couldn't do is get them clinical mental health counseling. And for a lot of these veterans, that was a challenge in kind of what got them into the place where life fell apart. We can do all that we can, get the resume in place, do all the networking that we can, but if we don't have our mindset right, if we don't transition properly, if we don't focus, if we don't manage our emotions, if we don't pay attention to our relationships, then we're not going to be as effective as we possibly could be. So that's number one, mental health and wellness, essential part of military transition. Number two, not all veterans have post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a common stereotype that some who are not in the service have. But there's a lot of veterans who say, oh, well, I have PTSD, and no, you really don't. Post-traumatic stress disorder meets a certain set of criteria, of which I'm sure we'll get into later. But it's something that has to be evaluated and diagnosed by a clinical mental health professional. Many people say that it exists only to pad the pockets and we can bill insurance and everything else like that. But post-traumatic stress disorder in and of itself is a diagnosable mental health condition that lasts far beyond what a natural response to trauma would be. One of the requirements for post-traumatic stress disorder is that it must last longer than 30 days after the traumatic incident. And there's certain other criteria that we can definitely go into later. But the prevalence rate, the frequency of post-traumatic stress disorder in individuals that have been exposed to trauma is only about, in some of the studies have said, anywhere from 11 to 20%. So 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 is a pretty big number. However, it's not every veteran. A significant majority of veterans do not have diagnosable post-traumatic stress disorder. That's not saying that they don't experience some challenges, they experience some aspects of post-traumatic stress disorder in one time in their life, and experience a different one at different times. Those kind of things happen too. But diagnosable clinical PTSD is not as prevalent as either the civilian community or either veterans would have us believe. And so understanding what the difference is, not every veteran who deployed has PTSD. It's patently false, and the assumption that some people have that that's the case can certainly hurt the veteran community, not to mention individual veterans themselves. So, mental health and wellness, essential part of military transition. Not all veterans have PTSD. Along with that, number 3, the challenges veterans face go beyond PTSD and traumatic brain injury. As I've mentioned elsewhere, I think when I talked to Eddie in the episode I'll refer to here in a minute, PTSD is sort of behavioral response. There are neurological bases of PTSD. And I'm going to have some brain specialists come on and talk about how exposure to trauma physically changes the regions and the structures in our brain, just as a blast and repeated exposure to IEDs and concussive blasts and banging your head on concrete and armor can lead to traumatic brain injury. But there are things that veterans experience that can create challenges in their post-military life that go beyond PTSD and TBI. Substance use, huge one. Anywhere from 75 to 80% of veterans who have some type of mental health condition, depression, anxiety or disorders, PTSD, of course, TBI, 80% of them also have a co-occurring substance use disorder. Is that because of the culture of the military? Substance use is common. Is it because of the numbing effects of substance use, the dulling of the chronic pain? When I talk about substance use, I'm not just talking about alcohol, not even just talking about marijuana, but prescription pills, abusing prescription pills, opiates in particular. And then the shift from opiates to heroin, to opioids, perks on the street and stuff like that. So I see a lot of veterans that struggle not just with something totally separate from their PTSD, that they also have a co-occurring substance use disorder. Emotion dysregulation, not being able to figure out how to control my emotions, again, totally separate from PTSD. I've seen veterans who haven't had the ability to regulate their emotions, to understand their emotions, that weren't exposed to trauma, but do whatever basic situations, learned helplessness, being trapped in a situation that you can't change, things like just on edge all the time. And a lot of things will overlap. And so people say, oh, that's hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is not an anxiety disorder, so it's something totally separate. Another thing that a lot of veterans struggle with is a lack of purpose and meaning. I would say that this is probably one of the biggest challenges outside of PTSD and TBI that goes across the board for all veterans. And we were in the military. We were kings and queens of our fate, so to speak. Of course, not entirely, but we were important, and we knew we were important, even though we were small. We small cog in the machine. We were very important, and so getting out and finding a job that doesn't give you that type of meaning and purpose and understanding, that's something that's pretty significant as well. Again, not PTSD, not traumatic brain injury. Another aspect that goes beyond PTSD is something that's called moral injury, and this is how our core beliefs about what's right and wrong with the world are changed by our experiences. Eddie and I actually spoke about moral injury pretty much at length in episode 160. of the Change Your POV podcast. So I would definitely go back and listen to that if that's something that you're interested in hearing. And I hope to have some of the leading researchers and practitioners on moral injury come on the show and talk more in depth, because what I see with a lot of veterans that they may think is PTSD, it's actually about what we believe to be right and wrong with the world has been changed by our experiences. Another thing that I see that veterans can struggle with or have struggled with is figuring out how to meet our needs. If many of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we learn to meet those needs in a certain way. We're in the military. Sometimes some of those needs are really kind of taken care of for us. We don't have to worry about our security or our safety, we don't have to worry about our security or our safety or our biological needs, so to speak, because that's really kind of supported for us. But as you go up the hierarchy, our aesthetic needs, we learn to appreciate things that may not be as socially acceptable. And when we get out of the military, we have to meet those needs in a new way, figuring out how to do that. It's not something like, I have to learn to be an adult or anything like that. It has to do with the fact that I now have to understand how to meet old needs in new ways. And another challenge that goes beyond PTSD and TBI, we've all been there, is relationship challenges. So my wife and I have been married for 4 out of my 5 deployments, and I'm not going to say it's been easy, and she'll definitely tell you it's not been easy. But figuring out how to re-engage in relationships after we've experienced combat, or after we've been in the military, after we have learned to do things in a certain way. That's number 3 is not all challenges that veterans face have to do with PTSD and TBI. Number 4 really kind of goes along with that, is not all those things are what you would consider crazy. I mean, it's normal reactions to a life that's not exactly normal. You don't have to be crazy to talk to a mental health professional. Working with a counselor can help you understand how to put a lot of these different things in place. Number 5, military service is an entirely different life. That means an entirely different culture. In the military, we have our own way of speaking. We have our own language. We have our own way of thinking. We have our own way of dressing. We are not ever going to be a civilian because a civilian has not had the lived experiences that we have as service members. And so understanding that once you leave the military service, you are a veteran, and that means you have a different mindset. I often describe it as if I went to go live in Ireland for 22 years and then came back and tried to live in America, it'd be a little different. It'd be a little challenging because even though we speak the same language, there are some different nuances. There's cultural differences. There's just different ways of thinking and experiencing. And so once we understand that our military service is a culture and that, like it or not, we are different, doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just that it is a different culture and a different experience. Number 6 is tied into that. Any mental health professional working with the veteran should understand that culture in order to provide the most benefit. This is something that I truly believe, that anyone who is going to be working as a mental health professional as a veteran needs to be able to understand what that veteran went through, what they experienced, and what their culture is like. Some people interpret that to mean that I think that every mental health professional that works with veterans should be a veteran. I don't believe that's true. I have a lot of colleagues who are extremely capable, who are not veterans, but they've taken the time to understand. They've taken the time to learn what it's like to be in that culture. And that's all that's necessary, is that they take the time to learn and understand. The 7th thing that I believe about veteran mental health is that veterans want people to understand their story, and they don't want to have to tell people about it at the same time. You'll hear me talk often about different paradoxes that veterans face, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, is many veterans want those who have never served in combat to understand what they went through, their own personal story. They want them to know what their personal experiences are, and they don't want to have to tell anybody about it. And so this is a challenge with a lot of veterans, that once one of those things becomes more important than the other, either the need to tell the story or the desire not to tell the story, that won't be resolved. It won't be fixed. And so giving the veterans the opportunity to tell their story in an appropriate and safe way is very important. Point number 8 is the fact that perpetuating the stigma against seeking mental health counseling is causing veterans to prolong their pain, not reduce it. This idea of, I'm going to suck it up, I'm going to drive on, other people have it worse than me, I'm not going to go see a shrink, you're not going to get it out of me, I don't talk about my emotions, you can't make me cry. That's not the point. I'm not sitting here trying to make every veteran cry. I'm not trying to get you to tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. What I do want is for you to be able to have these problematic challenges be in their proper place. And perpetuating the stigma against this is causing you to prolong your pain, not reduce it. Number 9, there's no need to suffer in silence or keep it a shameful secret. Suffering in silence is exactly that. It's suffering. There are mental health professionals out there who understand veterans, who get veterans, and I'm going to bring a lot of them on the show here. There's a lot of different resources. You can do a quick Google search. There'll be hundreds of thousands of hits for mental health professionals who are familiar with veterans and their experiences. There is absolutely no reason, no need to suffer. The resources are out there, the help is out there. And so that's my goal, is to be able to bring some of that understanding, to bring that out into awareness, into the community, into the veteran community, to say, you know what, if things are getting rough, if the kayak's about to tip over, if you're about to have a rollover, there are people who can help you. And then finally, number 10, and this is something that's pretty significant, and it's kind of the elephant in the room. And if we don't talk about it, it's people are going to wonder why. And that's the fact that veteran suicide is real. It's an epidemic. It's highly personal. It's very complicated. And in my opinion, it's not necessary. You know, we can have a lot of different discussions about end of life, about whether some people, who've committed heinous crimes, and this type of thing, and that goes into the complicated aspect. But the majority of the times in the suicides that I have personally been involved in, that it has been very destructive to the community, to those of us who experience it. There's not a veteran that I know who has not lost more people to suicide since their deployments than they did while they were on deployment. The casualties are continuing, and it's not necessary. Understanding what suicide is, talking about suicide, bringing it out into the open, all of these things are very important. You don't have to be a mental health professional. In fact, the chance is likely that that a mental health professional is not going to be the first one to talk to a veteran who's contemplating suicide. 1 in 4 veterans actually have the contemplation of suicide. It doesn't mean they're suicidal. It doesn't mean that we need to take away their guns. It doesn't mean that we need to lock them away. Suicide happens on a continuum. And again, I'm going to be bringing on some professionals to talk about the veteran suicide. So those are some quick 10 points that I personally believe about mental health. I'll recap them real quick. Mental health and wellness is an essential part of our military transition, just like our employment, just like our housing, resume, everything else. Number 2, not all veterans have post-traumatic stress disorder. Number 3, the challenges that veterans do have go beyond post-traumatic stress disorder and TBI. Number 4, you don't have to be crazy to talk to a mental health professional. Number 5, military service is an entirely different life, and that means an entirely different culture. And the sooner we understand that, the easier it's going to be. Number 6, any mental health professional working with the veteran should understand that culture in order to provide the most benefit. Number 7 is that veterans want people to understand their story, but they don't want to have to tell people about it. And that's something that veterans have to resolve to be able to get support. Number 8, perpetuating the stigma against seeking mental health counseling is causing veterans to prolong their pain, not reduce it. Number 9, no need to suffer in silence or keep what you're struggling with a shameful secret. And the number 10, veteran suicide is an epidemic. It's highly personal, very complicated, and, in my opinion, completely unnecessary. So there you have it, folks. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Again, these first couple episodes are going to be about me talking a little bit more in depth about some of this stuff or some of the ideas about what a veteran wants their mental health professional to know, what a mental health professional wants a veteran to know. And I've got some pretty good interviews lined up coming up in the next couple weeks, talking about veteran mental health, not just here in the U.S., but some of our coalition partners overseas. And I really think that if you take the time to listen and understand and raise your awareness about veteran mental health, that you'll find that it's time well spent. Look forward to hearing your feedback. Feel free to subscribe, to be able to leave a review if you'd like to do that, and definitely give me your feedback. It's always welcome. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.